But before Shan left earlier today, we were discussing the news that Kellen Moore had taken the job with the Chargers. You know, it's funny, the old Rob Ryan quote, "I have a job in 5 minutes," that you mentioned yesterday, Chop. And you had said jokingly, like, I don't know if he'll have a job in 5 minutes, but it was pretty close. It was pretty close to 5 minutes for Kellen Moore.
Yeah, it was. It was 18 hours, not even. In 18 hours, he went and he got, arguably, I wouldn't say a better job, but, because it's the Chargers versus the Cowboys. But, I mean, he got a better situation. He got the best available quarterback on the market and, a coach that I think is really, really good. I love Brandon Staley. I know he rubs people the wrong way. He's kind of too radical, but I love the way that he runs the game, the fourth down aggression, and just we're going for it on because the numbers say you should go for 4th and 1 on every yard line of the field outside the 9, your own 9. Beyond that, because you can't have 4th and 1 anywhere else. You can't have 4th and 1 on your own 8.
Right. But other than that, just go for it each time. And look, I think that's something that we all generally were frustrated with, though, with this team at times, is the conservative 4th down calls later in the season. Like the fact that those 3 times they didn't go for it on 4th down against San Francisco. I thought 2 of them were really awful, and 1 of them was just kind of a debate if you wanted to do that or play field position. But Kellen Moore was part of that, so we'll see if there's any friction there. But it started this discussion about Kellen Moore's resume, and Sean had brought up the point that Sean had brought up the point that is Kellen Moore potentially, given his resume and all the kicking he took, is he one of the most disrespected personalities in the history of DFW sports? And so we started talking about it during some of these breaks, and it actually turned into kind of an interesting conversation. We got some feedback on Twitter. We want to get your thoughts, too, on the truckwreck.com fan text, 877-881-1053, 877-881-1053. Who are the most disrespected personalities in the history of DFW sports, and does Kellen Moore qualify? So I'll throw to you first, Jobby. Does Kellen Moore qualify as a disrespected personality in the Metroplex? And who are some of the names that you would throw out?
I think he does qualify as a disrespected name. I think he was really good. I mean, it's really hard to put up the offensive numbers that he did and not be really, really good. So I definitely think that he was a disrespected coach. I don't think he was I don't think he was like over the line. In the disrespect, I thought he was still split. I mean, a lot of people did think he was good, but this is normal. Like people always trash the OC because they don't want to trash the quarterback or they don't want to trash the head. Like everybody's got their own sort of unique biases in there. But I think that Kellen Moore was definitely, disrespected in terms of the production that he put up here.
And who would you say around that? We were I know you mentioned earlier when we were talking about this during one of the breaks, Doug Free is one that stands out for you. He
stands out for me, man. Like Doug Free stands out. Like he was a good player. He was a good player. He wasn't great, but he was good. And he got here basically. He took over from Mark Colombo, and Colombo was a tremendous right tackle for this team for a long time. And he took over for him and. At the end of his career, at the end of Colombo's career, and listen, Doug Free was a good player. He took over. He took over for Flozell as well. He switched over sides and such, and he was kind of all over the map. Wherever they needed him, he went. Wherever they needed him, he was a solid player. So he was one that I had, and then I went and the fan text came up with a ton of names, not just with mostly with the Cowboys though.
Sure. And we've got we've got 972. Dak is hella disrespected. He has a strong fan base too. The volume of disrespect, yes. The percentages related to how much they're deserving, I think that there are others who skew a little bit more heavily. This is an answer I'm interested in. 817, Dave Campo. You think he was? Here's the thing about Dave Campo. He was in an unenviable position. They didn't have picks. They traded him away for Joey Galloway. They were making awful picks in the process. It was this awful rebuild time. He was a good defensive coach for them for a number of years. Came back a little bit later, coached the secondary. So I could see that as him being somebody that got a little bit more heat than he deserved. Some of the others that came to mind for me, Avery Johnson. I know that it was time to go, and he was not a perfect coach by any means for the Mavericks, but he was somebody I felt like who was just disrespected as if he never did anything, and I thought that was a little over the top. Greg Ellis, he will always be not Randy Moss to most of the fans, but he was a really good defensive end for the better part of a decade, and I thought that they always held him to some unrealistic expectations and standards because of who went ahead or who they passed over to pick him. And then 2 pitchers for the Rangers, Colby Lewis, who got ragged pretty consistently the last 4 years, I feel like, that he was here in Texas, 4 or 5 years. And then our buddy, Derek Holland. I felt at times that, people didn't appreciate how solid he was. I mean, I believe during his time in Texas, I think he finished with an ERA under 4 for his career. And I know that his FIP was always, his fielding independent percentage was always really good. And so, to me, I think Holland, Lewis, those are some guys that stand out to me. Greg Ellis. We had some interesting names sent to us on Twitter. Flozell Adams. It's a good answer. Brandon
Flozell's
Carr.
one. I mean, there's been, let's see, Byron Jones. Terrence Newman's another one. Anthony Spencer is a good name. Terrence Williams. Jason Garrett.
Terrence Williams is not a bad name because nobody thinks he was any good, and he was a decent receiver for them for a few years. And I think people just remember the scooter and they laugh at him and things like that. This one's interesting on the fan text, and I'll throw this over to you, Mr. Hockey, RJ Choppy, because I don't remember this being the case at all. 469 Darian Hatcher. I remember Hatcher being pretty like I mean, when he left, there were people that were hurt because he went to the Red Wings, but right. I remember people feeling like Hatcher was like the heart and soul of those Stanley Cup teams.
I don't remember him being disrespected. I thought he was tremendous, and I thought a lot of people loved him. I don't remember him being a disrespected player at all. Maybe I'm just wrong on that one. Let me throw a Maverick name out for you.
Let's get it.
Antoine Jameson.
Interesting.
He was 1 year here. His numbers, if you look at it, now he played about 10 minutes per game less here than he did everywhere else in that time of his career. Mm-hmm. He was in his prime. He only averaged 15 and 6 here. The 2 years prior, he averaged 20 and 22 a game. The 2 years after, he averaged 20 and 22 a game. His player efficiency, though, was the highest of his career in the 1 year he played with the Mavs. Fans he didn't fit for whatever reason. They couldn't figure out how to use him. I don't think the fans very much cared for him either. But he was a good player. And I thought he was getting undue hate that he didn't deserve here.
Yeah, and he won Sixth Man of the Year, I think, that year that he was here.
Yeah, I think he did.
And so he was a productive player. That was one of the biggest problems too, is just like he was a power forward essentially. He was listed as a small forward, but he essentially played as a power forward, and I think they just felt like, okay, gotta clear up some space somehow. You're not going to start here, and I don't think he wanted to just be a forever backup. And he went to Washington and had a really successful run there. Another interesting name here, Roy Williams from the 972. That's an interesting one because if that's the case, I'm probably guilty of it because I think this city turned on Roy Williams, and I guess it depends on which one you're talking about. I assume they're talking about the safety, but I think the safety Roy Williams, the city turned on him. This fan base turned on him after like year 2, and he was a good player. Like I mean, he definitely had his limitations. He couldn't cover. Everybody remembers him giving up those 2 bombs to Santana Moss and Mark Brunell in Washington on Monday Night Football in 2004. And that was when it just kind of shifted, I felt like, for people. And they were like, nope, this dude can't cover. He's a waste. Bill Parcells had the line, he's a biscuit away from being a linebacker. And so he took a lot of heat that was probably unnecessary. I mean, he was a 5-time Pro Bowler.
Yeah, he was. I wonder how much of that was a Pro Bowler because of his name.
Sure. I mean, the first year was absolutely deserved. I don't think he got it that year, but he should have. But he was. I mean, he was a intimidating, physical, like really good football player. It's just he had his limitations. I would have loved to have seen, if you give Roy Williams to like Dan Quinn today, like give him that player, I think he'd be, we would be in love with that player. I mean, some people have, I saw somebody make that comparison recently. They felt Donovan Wilson is kind of that guy. I don't think he hits as hard as Roy Williams did. Roy Williams used to just like throttle people. That was all he looked to do, and he was big. He was like 225, just a big dude. Obviously, you remember he gave us the horse collar tackle rule.
He did.
It was him tackling T.O.
T.O.
Some other ones we saw over on Twitter. Shin-Soo Choo. You like that one?
Look, I was this is funny. I was a big proponent of Shin-Soo Choo. He was the analytics dream. Everybody loved him, right? High on base percentage. Couldn't do anything else. That's what he was. I loved him. Listen to his on-base percentages. Let's see.
It was absurd. The discrepancy between his batting average and on-base percentage every year was insane.
Insane. So these are like, let's go with, from his age 29 season on. 373, 423, 340, 375, back-to-back 357, 371, 371, 323. That's absurd.
All while hitting like 260 at times.
I mean, his career average was 275, and he was about like 280. But he had a career, his career OPS was 820. That's good. His OPS plus was 122, which means like 20% better than league average as a hitter. And, man, you thought he was garbage. The fans thought he was garbage. But all this guy did, all he did was get to first base. And there are a lot worse things you could do as a baseball player.